Welcome to this week's midweek space news roundup. So as usual, I will go over some space news I found on websites and on social media posts. But first, let's bring up this banner showing our X account. We're on X at Space Startup Hub. When I do a new video, I post a link to it on X so you can keep track of things there. As a reminder, at the weekend, I do a weekly live stream. I cover all the videos I've done and read some of the comments out. So if you leave a comment here today, perhaps it'll come up at the weekend live stream. So with that, let's get into the first video of this week. Let's start with the first article I saw this week, and this is on Nvidia getting into space computing. So let's read this press release from Nvidia. So the title is Nvidia launches space computing, rocketing AI into orbit. Engineered for size, weight, and power-constrained environments, AI inferencing for orbital data centers, geospatial intelligence, and autonomous space operations. So inference is querying the AI model. So with AI models, you're either doing one of two things. You're training the model, you're adjusting the weights, or you've got a trained model and you're just querying the model for some answers. So inference means asking a trained model and getting an answer. So it goes on to say Etherflux, Axiom Space, Kepler Communications, Planet Labs, PBC, Sophia Space, and StarCloud are using Nvidia accelerated computing platforms to power next-generation space missions. So it goes on to say, unlocking a new era of space innovation, bringing AI compute to orbital data centers. AI applications to operate seamlessly from ground to space and space to space. So there's two modes. Either you can query an orbital data center from the ground using a mobile phone or website, or satellites in space can query an orbital data center. That gives very low latency, the satellites in space, the orbiting data centers in space, so you can get very fast responses. And of course, satellites do collect huge amounts of data for Earth observation or communications. So instead of transmitting all that data, which could be terabytes down to Earth for processing, why not send it to an orbital data center and just get the key insights? And I mentioned this before, but for instance, if you're doing maritime tracking, all you really need to know is what ship is it, and where's it going? So that's the advantage of doing space to space, which is probably the first application of orbital data centers. Rubin GPU on the module delivers up to 25 times more AI compute for space-based inferencing, enabling next-generation compute for orbital data centers. And then we have a quote from the CEO of Nvidia, and he says, space computing, the final frontier, has arrived. As we deploy satellite constellations and explore deeper into space, intelligence must live wherever data is generated, said Jensen Huang. AI processing across space and ground systems enables real-time sensing, decision-making, and autonomy. With our partners, we're extending Nvidia beyond our planet, boldly taking intelligence where it's never gone before, unquote. And that quote seems familiar. So he goes on to say, industry leaders are using Nvidia accelerated computing platforms to power next-generation space missions across orbital and ground environments. And then we have a quote from Philip Johnson, CEO of StarCloud, which I've covered on my channel several times already. And he says, StarCloud is building purpose-designed orbital data centers to deliver cloud and AI infrastructure directly in space. With Nvidia, we can bring true hyperscale class AI computing to orbit, processing data at the source, reducing downlink dependency, and enabling customers to run training and inference workloads in space for the first time. This is a critical step towards making space a seamless extension of the global cloud, unquote. And notice there he's talking more about space-to-space operations, which is what StarCloud will be targeting first. It's the lower cost option, and it means they don't have to have massive scale to begin with. But StarCloud will definitely compete with terrestrial data centers in the future, just not to begin with. And the press release goes on to say that Nvidia Space One Vera Rubin module delivers data center class AI at scale. Okay, that is the article, and we have an image here. This is Jensen Huang, he's the CEO of Nvidia, and here you have probably a familiar image if you've watched this channel for any length of time. This is a orbiting data center from StarCloud, previously called Lunar Orbit. So you can find a video from me on Lunar Orbit, I think from 2024. I covered the company as soon as it came out of stealth, and recently this year I did an update covering StarCloud 2 and StarCloud 3. So this is definitely StarCloud, and we actually have a ex-post from Philip Johnson, the CEO of StarCloud, saying, "The render is from StarCloud, render for those asking." That is the first story, and we actually do have another article from Payload Space on this topic. So let me just bring that up. I will read that. It may give us a different spin on the topic. So let's have a read what Payload Space is saying. So Nvidia unveils new hardware to unlock orbital data centers. Nvidia unveiled a new piece of tech yesterday, the Space One Vera Rubin module, built to perform in the harsh, low swap environment of space. Swap means size, weight, and power. So low swap means small size, low mass, and low power. And that's necessary for space because you're constrained on the amount of mass you can put into orbit because it's expensive. But more importantly, you're constrained on the volume. Most launches are volume constrained, so you want the size to be very small. And obviously in space, power is an issue. You have to use the sun. These modules are designed specifically for this space environment. So it says designed to deliver up to 25 times more AI compute, which we've read already in the press release. And it goes on to say, isn't yet commercially available. And they're working with the 6 customers. We know that already. Space computing is the final frontier has arrived. So Payload Space says moving the computing power to space allows data to be processed with less latency and with power generated by the sun. And we have a quote at the end. Of course, in space, there's no conduction, there's no convection, there's just radiation. And so we have to figure out how to cool those systems out in space, but we've got lots of great engineers working on it, Huang said, unquote. That's an important point at the end. There are 3 normal modes of getting rid of thermal waste heat, and that is conduction. You physically touch something, like a hot metal touches another surface, and heat is transferred that way. You have convection, you have the air currents, which are next to something hot, and they take the heat away, that's convection. And then you have radiation. In space, because there's no atmosphere, you only have radiation. There's no conduction, there's no convection. So you have to radiate the thermal waste heat away, which requires very large radiator panels. So this is a key constraint, a technical problem you have to solve. You need to launch very large radiator panels. The other issue that was not mentioned there is, of course, radiation. There's more radiation in space. You're above the atmosphere. You're exposed to galactic cosmic radiation, which is pervasive. It's constant. And occasionally you'll get solar flares as well. So you have to design your chips to tolerate higher radiation environment. So there's a lot of technical stuff that you have to work on, but it's very, very promising for orbital data centers. And this new chip has 25 times inference capability, which should lead to a lot more compute in space. So that's the first story. Okay, our second story is on a company I covered already called GRU Space, and we have an investment in the company. So I'm just going to read the press release first, and then we'll talk about it. So the title is Planet Ventures announces strategic investment in GRU Space to support first hotel on the moon. So Planet Ventures Inc. announced that it has made a strategic $100,000 investment in Galactic Resources Utilization Space Inc., or GRU Space. This helps Planet's commitment to supporting potentially transformative technologies that could expand humanity's presence beyond Earth. And GRU Space is creating the first lunar hotel with an estimated opening in 2032, and they plan to land an inflatable, pressurized habitat on the lunar surface capable of hosting small groups of guests for multi-day stays. And we have a quote here from the CEO of Planet Ventures, Etienne Moshevich. "We are thrilled to have made this investment in GRU Space at this early and exciting stage of human space exploration. This investment reflects our belief in GRU Space's vision and technical approach to building sustainable long-term habitats beyond Earth. Planet is proud to help enable what could become one of the most iconic pillars of the interplanetary economy," unquote. And the article goes on to say GRU Space's innovative approach includes using advanced habitation modules and in situ resource utilization, where lunar materials are transformed into building components that can support future facilities on the moon and beyond. And it goes on to say first construction mission planned for 2029. And the bottom here, it says about Planet Ventures Inc., because I don't know anything about the company. Planet Ventures Inc. is an investment issuer that actively invests in disruptive companies across high growth industries. So there you go. I found that interesting. And a little more on GRU Space. I did a video on them soon as they came out of stealth a few months ago, I think. So you can watch the video for all the details, but a quick recap. This is their hotel, and there's another image from inside. So you get very nice views of the lunar surface. You've got the Earth in the background. There's lots of slides I put into the video explaining their business model and so on. But here are GRU's 5 foundational beliefs. 1, expansion into space is inevitable. 2, exploration will drive up the quality of life. 3, the necessity of using local resources, that's ISRU. 4, civilizational autonomy, independent industrial base. And 5, establishing off-world population centers creates trillion-dollar companies within the next 30 years. So that's what GRU Space believes. They're working on 2 lunar hotels. And we have this here, their pricing model. Their version 1 hotel is inflatable. A crew of 4 can go spend a week or 2 maybe there in the habitat and then come back. But their version 2 is a bigger, more advanced hotel using local resources to create lunar concrete. It can support up to 10 guests, will last for 20 years, and will be around about 100 tons. We have a video from GRU Space. First man on the moon, 1969. First GRU mission, 2029-2030. Habitat established 2030-2032. And then the full lunar hotel, this is the version 2 for 10 people. And that would be in the mid-2030s probably, and nice view outside. So that is their plan. Okay, our final story this week is on a new contract for Isar Aerospace, which if you're not familiar with them, is a German space startup working on their Spectrum rocket. And it's due to have its second launch attempt, maybe even today. If we have a look at this X-post here, after resolving the pressurization valve issue identified during the first launch attempt, a new launch window for mission Onward and Upward will open no earlier than the 19th of March from GRU Space, subject to weather and range variability. They had a first launch attempt a while ago now, 2025. They've been testing their second vehicle. We have some footage from their tests in GRU Spaceport in Norway. As you can see, it's very cold, an isolated place, but this is where they're launching their rockets from. So this is the first stage of their Spectrum rocket, testing all the engines, and it was a successful hot fire test. So the rocket is qualified, it's ready for launch. So that is the status of the Isar Aerospace Spectrum rocket. So let's read this article. And this is on Isar Aerospace website. The title is Isar Aerospace secures first active debris removal mission with Astroscale. So Astroscale is a company I've covered already. They're doing end-of-life missions, orbital debris missions. They're a Japanese company, but they have an office in the UK. And this mission is for the UK office. So the press release goes on to say, Isar Aerospace has signed a launch service agreement with Astroscale, the UK office, to launch the ELSA-M in-orbit demonstration mission. This mission represents a major milestone for Astroscale's pioneering end-of-life removal services, and it increases Isar Aerospace's rapidly expanding launch manifest, the strong global demand for a flexible launch from Europe. The ELSA-M IOD, that's in-orbit demonstration mission, will mark a critical step towards commercial in-orbit servicing. And we have a quote here from Stellan Gulen, who is the Chief Commercial Officer of Isar Aerospace. And she says, we are thrilled to partner with Astroscale. The ELSA-M in-orbit demonstration mission will not only display the future of active debris removal in space, but already today shows why customers opt to launch with Isar Aerospace. And she goes on to say, this is our first involvement of active debris removal mission, and we are proud to contribute to space sustainability by supporting Astroscale's pioneering activities, unquote. The mission will be launched on board Isar Aerospace's Spectrum launch vehicle from the company's dedicated launch site at GRU Space. Astroscale is a global leader in in-orbit servicing, and the company aims to secure a circular economy in space through missions that inspect, service, and remove satellites. ELSA-M will be the world's first commercial end-of-life service, and it's supported by the UK Space Agency. So the satellite from Astroscale is 520 kilos in mass, and the spacecraft will capture and remove an end-of-life Eutelsat OneWeb satellite. The ELSA-M mission is a key step in Astroscale's roadmap towards routine, scalable in-orbit services, enabling satellite operators to remove debris responsibly, support a sustainable space environment, and contribute to the growth of circular economy in space. So that is the article. So I think the in-orbit economy is going to get bigger and bigger. We have the end-of-life servicing missions, active debris removal, moving satellites to graveyard orbits, and potentially in the future repairing, upgrading, and refueling satellites, especially when there's orbiting data centers, which I think are coming in the next 3 to 5 years. You could have tens of thousands. We already have a 10,000 satellite constellation with Starlink, and that will be the first of many. You'll have Project Leo, previously the Kuiper project from Amazon. You have a lot of Chinese constellations. So there'll be a lot of constellations, Earth observation, telecommunications, internet, and then orbiting data centers, which could scale to millions of satellites, all of which have to be serviced, disposed of, repaired, upgraded, and refueled. So I think the in-orbit economy is going to get very large in the future. Astroscale is one of the key startups working on this kind of mission, which is very exciting. And also with Isar Aerospace, probably the leading rocket launcher in the European startup scene at the moment, I would say. They've already had one launch attempt, which only lasted 30 seconds, but they're now very, very close to launching a second time, perhaps even today. And their client list is growing and growing. So this is just their recent client list. They actually have payloads going back to 2021, 2022. Just in the last year, they got contracts from ESA, the European Space Agency, and that's 2 launch agreements. September, they have an agreement with R Space in Austria. December, they have another launch contract with ESA. And in November, they had a contract with SEOPS, that's a US company. And just this month, the Astroscale mission, which is a commercial mission to deorbit a satellite. So they're doing very well in terms of getting contracts, but of course, they have to succeed in putting payloads into space, in orbit, and in the right orbit, which is quite difficult to do. So we'll see how the second launch goes, which is, like I said, could happen at any moment now. I will be covering the European space startup scene, covering all the launch providers in Europe very, very soon. I've done that this week with the US. I'm going to do a video covering Europe and then one covering Asia, including South Korea, Japan, Australia, and so on. That is the space news for this week. And I'm sure next week we'll be covering what happens with Isar Aerospace and any other news that happens. So thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.